Have you ever watched a video late at night and suddenly felt like someone was watching you? Maybe a shadow moved in the corner of your room, or a chill ran down your spine for no reason. What if I told you that feeling wasn't just your imagination? Tonight, we're diving into the darkest corners of the internet, uncovering 20 real paranormal events caught on camera, terrifying moments that defy logic, reason, and science. These aren't Hollywood effects or clever editing tricks. These are videos captured by ordinary people, security cameras, family recordings, live streams that show something truly unexplainable. Some of these clips have been analyzed by experts and remain unsolved. Others have caused entire communities to believe that the supernatural is real. Ghostly apparitions, poltergeist attacks, demonic figures, phantom voices, all documented on camera, all sending shivers down the spine of anyone who dares to watch. So, dim the lights, grab your headphones, and lock the doors. Because, after seeing these clips, you might never look at the dark the same way again. Are you ready? Let's begin, if you dare. Eastern State Penitentiary stands like a Gothic fortress in the heart of Philadelphia. Its massive stone walls and crumbling cell blocks, casting long shadows over a dark history. Built in 1829, it was once considered a revolutionary prison system designed to encourage penitence and reform. But behind its imposing facade, whispers of suffering and despair still linger in. For those who have dared to enter its decaying halls, the ghosts of its past make themselves known. When Eastern State first opened, its founders believed solitary confinement could lead criminals to reflect, repent, and change. Each prisoner was locked in a small cell, alone with only a Bible for company. Even their meals were slid through a small opening in the door. Guards wore soft shoes and spoke in hushed tones to maintain silence. For years, no inmate ever spoke to another human being. But isolation can destroy the mind, and as the years passed, madness began to creep into the hearts of the prisoners. Some tore at their own flesh, others screamed for hours on end, until their voices gave out. Stories spread of men who saw things that weren't their shadows moving, voices whispering, phantom hands touching them in the dark. The prison closed in 1971 after decades of overcrowding, violence, and neglect. It sat abandoned for years, its stone corridors rotting under the weight of history. Today, it stands as a museum, a place where visitors come to learn about its past. But many who step inside leave with more than just historical knowledge. They leave with chilling memories they can't explain. One of the most haunted areas is Cell Block 12, known for its iron doors and eerie echoes. Visitors report hearing disembodied voices here, low whispers that seem to slither across the crumbling walls. Some have heard laughter echoing through the empty hall, the sound of men talking when no one is there. Paranormal investigators have captured strange EVP recordings, and more than once, guests have felt a sudden drop in temperature, as though something cold and unseen has passed through them. Another hotspot is the old guard tower and the corridors leading to it. Security staff have reported seeing shadowy figures darting through the halls at night. When they check the cameras, nothing is there. One former guard recalled an encounter during a late-night patrol. He heard heavy footsteps following him, loud enough to echo down the hall. When he turned, the corridor was empty. Moments later, he felt a sharp tug on his jacket, as if someone had grabbed him, but he was completely alone. Perhaps the most famous spirit said to haunt Eastern State is that of Al Capone. The notorious gangster served 8 months there in 1929. Unlike other prisoners, Capone lived in luxury, his cell furnished with a rug, a desk, and a radio. But even with these comforts, he was reportedly tormented. Capone told guards that he was being haunted by the ghost of James Clark, one of the men murdered in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. He would wake screaming in the night, shouting, "Jimmy, leave me alone." Some visitors claim they've seen a figure in Capone's old cell, pacing back and forth, whispering words they can't understand. One of the most unsettling stories involves the operating room in the prison's old hospital wing. This is where doctors once performed primitive surgeries and experiments on inmates suffering from mental illness. Visitors describe hearing the clatter of metal instruments and the soft moan of a patient in pain. though the room has been empty for decades. A few have even reported the feeling of a hand gripping their arm as they walk through, cold and clammy, like something from the grave. Eastern State is also known for its eerie sounds, doors slamming shut on their own, chains rattling when no one is near, phantom footsteps echoing across the stone floors. Photographs taken inside often reveal strange anomalies, orbs of light, misty shapes, and even faces peering from dark corners. Some skeptics say it's just the power of suggestion, that the crumbling walls and flickering lights play tricks on the mind. But others believe something far older and darker lingers within those cell blocks. Perhaps it's the energy of all the men who suffered there, the hopeless, the insane, the violent, and the broken. Perhaps it's the echoes of punishment, isolation, and despair that seeped into the stone. Whatever the truth, those who visit Eastern State often leave with a sense that they've been watched, that something still walks those halls long after the gates were locked for the last time. Even now, when night falls and the city around it grows quiet, the penitentiary seems to breathe. The wind moans through its ruined corridors, and the shadows seem to move with a will of their own. For those who listen closely, whispers still rise from the darkness, a reminder that some prisons were never meant to let their dead go free. Deep in the heart of St. Francisville, Louisiana, stands the Myrtles Plantation, a stately antebellum home, draped in Spanish moss and Southern charm. But behind its picturesque beauty lies a chilling reputation. Known as one of the most haunted houses in America, the Myrtles is steeped in tragedy, betrayal, and whispers of restless spirits that refuse to leave. The story begins in 1796, when General David Bradford built the original house on the property. Over the years, it passed through many owners. But one tale has forever marked the plantation, the legend of Chloe. Chloe was said to be an enslaved woman who worked inside the house, serving the family. Rumors suggest that Chloe was caught eavesdropping on a private conversation and, as punishment, had her ear cut off. From then on, she wore a green turban to hide her injury. Desperate to regain favor with the family, Chloe devised a plan. She baked a cake for the mistress and her children, but laced it with crushed oleander, leaves of deadly poison. Some believe she intended only to make them ill, so she could nurse them back to health and earn forgiveness. But the plan went horribly wrong. The mistress, Sarah Woodruff, and her 2 daughters ate the cake and died within hours. When the other enslaved workers discovered what Chloe had done, they dragged her from the house and hanged her from a nearby tree. Her body was thrown into the river, and the plantation fell under a dark shadow that has never lifted. Today, visitors and staff claim Chloe still roams the halls, her green turban unmistakable. Guests have reported seeing her reflection in mirrors, standing silently in doorways, or gliding across the veranda late at night. One of the most famous pieces of evidence is an old photograph taken in the 1990s for an insurance company. The photo, meant to show the side of the house, captured what appears to be a woman in a green turban standing between 2 buildings. Experts have analyzed the image countless times, but no explanation has ever satisfied the skeptics. Those who believe swear it is Chloe, forever haunting the place where her life ended so violently. But Chloe is not the only spirit said to linger at the Myrtles. Some speak of a young girl named Cornelia, who died of yellow fever in the house. Guests have seen her skipping down the grand staircase, her laughter echoing faintly before fading into silence. Others have encountered ghostly children tugging on their clothes or heard small footsteps racing through empty halls. One of the most chilling stories involves the grand mirror in the foyer. Local legend says that after the poisoning, the mirrors were not covered during the mourning period, a Southern tradition meant to prevent spirits from becoming trapped inside. Because of this, it's believed that the souls of Sarah Woodruff and her daughters remain in that mirror to this day. Visitors often report seeing handprints appear on the glass, even after it has been freshly polished. Some claim they've seen the faint outline of faces staring back at them, faces that do not belong to anyone in the room. The piano in the parlor is another source of unexplained activity. Staff have locked up for the night, only to hear the delicate notes of a tune drifting through the air long after the house is empty. When they check the room, The piano lid is closed, and the keys are still. Lights flicker, doors open and close on their own, and cold spots appear without warning. Some guests have even fled in the middle of the night, refusing to spend another moment inside. Perhaps the most terrifying encounters come from those who have seen the woman in white. She is described as a tall figure dressed in an old-fashioned gown, wandering the upstairs hallway or standing silently at the foot of the bed. Some believe she is the spirit of Sarah Woodruff, mourning her tragic death and the loss of her children. Others think she is someone else, entirely a spirit, from an even darker chapter in the plantation's history, one that has never been told. Skeptics argue these stories are nothing more than legend, embellished over time to attract tourists. But those who have felt the icy grip of fear inside the Myrtles plantation tell a different story. They speak of shadows that move when no one is near, of whispers that seem to breathe against the back of your neck, and of an overwhelming sense that you are never truly alone. As night falls and the last rays of sunlight sink behind the moss-draped oaks, the house grows still but never silent. The walls seem to hum with memories, the air heavy with secrets that refuse to die. Whether it's the vengeful spirit of Chloe, the sorrowful mother in white, or the laughter of unseen children, the Myrtles plantation remains a place where the past is never buried. For those who dare to visit, one thing is certain: the ghosts of the Myrtles are waiting, and they do not rest. The Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, nestled in the majestic Canadian Rockies, is one of the most iconic and luxurious hotels in the world. Its towering turrets and sweeping mountain views make it look like a castle pulled from a fairy tale. But behind the opulence and grandeur lies a chilling legend that has haunted the halls for nearly a century: the tale of the Ghost Bride. The story begins in the early 1930s, when a young couple chose the Fairmont Banff Springs as the setting for their dream wedding. The bride was said to be a local beauty, dressed in an elegant white gown that shimmered like snow against the grand staircase of the hotel. The ceremony was flawless, and the reception was filled with music and laughter. Guests toasted to love and happiness as the couple prepared to begin their life together. But fate had other plans. According to legend, tragedy struck on the day of the wedding, turning a moment of pure joy into a nightmare that would echo through time. The bride, eager to make a dramatic entrance, descended the grand marble staircase that spiraled through the heart of the hotel. Her gown, with its flowing layers and delicate lace, trailed gracefully behind her. But as she made her way down the steps, disaster struck. Her foot slipped on the hem of her dress, or perhaps on the smooth marble itself, and she tumbled violently down the staircase. Some say she struck her head on the stone, while others whisper that her dress caught fire from the candles lining the stairway. In either version, the result was the same. The young bride died instantly, just moments before she was to begin her new life. The wedding guests were devastated, and the joyous celebration turned into mourning. The groom, heartbroken and inconsolable, left the hotel shortly after, never to return. But the bride, it seems, never truly left. For decades, staff and guests have reported seeing a spectral figure drifting through the halls of the Fairmont Banff Springs, a bride in a flowing white gown, her face hidden by a veil. She is most often seen on the grand staircase where she met her tragic end. Some describe her as gliding gracefully down the steps, her gown trailing behind her like mist. Others say she appears at the top of the stairs, frozen in time, as if about to take that fateful first step. Late at night, when the hotel grows quiet, guests have heard the soft swish of fabric brushing against the marble steps, followed by the faint sound of sobbing. A few claim they've seen her reflection in the mirrors along the corridor, pale figure in white, standing perfectly still before vanishing into thin air. Or a shadow that seems to take the shape of a woman in a wedding gown. One of the most famous encounters happened when a hotel employee was closing up one of the ballrooms late at night. He turned to leave and saw a woman in a long white gown standing near the staircase, her head bowed. Thinking she was a bride taking pictures, he approached to offer assistance. But as he got closer, the figure lifted her head, and where her face should have been was nothing but darkness. The employee fled in terror, and when he returned moments later with another staff member, the woman was gone. There are other eerie reports as well. Some guests say they've felt a sudden, icy chill on the staircase, as if a cold breeze passes through the otherwise warm air. Others have heard the faint strains of wedding music playing from an empty ballroom, or the distant echo of laughter and clinking glasses, as though the celebration that never was is replaying in some ghostly loop. What makes the legend of the ghost bride so haunting is the sense of longing that seems to cling to her spirit. Unlike angry or vengeful ghosts, she appears as a sorrowful figure, bound to the place where her life ended so abruptly. Some believe she wanders the halls, searching for her lost love, while others think she simply cannot leave the site of her greatest joy and greatest tragedy. Today, the Fairmont Banff Springs embraces its haunted history. Guests from around the world come hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous bride, to walk the grand staircase where her story began and ended. Some leave with only photographs of the breathtaking scenery. Others leave with something more, a lingering chill, a strange feeling of being watched, or a fleeting vision of white disappearing around a corner. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the legend of the ghost bride endures, woven into the very fabric of the hotel's history. Her presence is felt in every hushed whisper along the marble halls, in every shadow that flickers against the candlelight. And if you ever find yourself standing at the top of that grand staircase, take a moment to listen. You might just hear the faint rustle of a wedding gown and the soft echo of footsteps that lead nowhere. Footsteps belonging to a bride who never got her happy ending. Waverly Hills Sanatorium looms on a lonely hilltop in Louisville, Kentucky, its crumbling brick facade and shattered windows standing as a monument to suffering and despair. Once hailed as a state-of-the-art tuberculosis hospital in the early 1900s, it was a place of both hope and heartbreak. At the height of the tuberculosis epidemic, thousands of men, women, and children passed through its doors, many never to return. Death was a constant visitor, here so constant that a secret tunnel, known as the body chute, was built to transport the dead unseen, so the living would not lose hope. But even after its closure, Waverly Hills has never truly emptied. Today, it is known as one of the most haunted locations in the world, and among its many ghosts, one figure stands out above all others: the Shadow Man. The legend of the Shadow figure began long after the sanatorium shut its doors in 1961. After years of abandonment, vandals and thrill-seekers began sneaking inside, hoping to glimpse the remnants of its dark past. They expected peeling paint, broken furniture, and graffiti. What they didn't expect were the shadows moving, watching, waiting. The shadow figure is not a single ghost, but rather a dark presence that seems to take many forms. Witnesses describe it as a silhouette darker than the surrounding darkness, often humanoid in shape, but shifting and formless, like smoke given life. It moves silently through the long, decaying hallways, sometimes darting across doorways, sometimes lingering in corners, as though observing intruders. There are no eyes, no face, just an overwhelming sense of dread that floods the mind of anyone who sees it. One of the most notorious places to encounter the shadow figure is the third-floor hallway. Investigators and visitors alike have reported seeing shapes gliding from one room to another, appearing solid and then vanishing as if swallowed by the shadows themselves. Flashlights fail, batteries drain, and the air turns icy cold without warning. Some have tried to approach, only to watch the figure retreat effortlessly into the darkness, leaving nothing but the sound of their own pounding heartbeat. Perhaps the most terrifying encounters occur in the infamous fourth floor, considered the most haunted part of Waverly Hills. The fourth floor once housed the sickest patients, those who had little chance of survival. Death came frequently here, and so, it seems, did something else. The shadow figure on this floor is larger, more imposing, sometimes described as crawling along the walls or ceiling like an insect, its limbs twisting unnaturally. Visitors often feel as if they are being surrounded, the darkness pressing in from all sides. Some have even been touched, cold fingers brushing their arms, or a sudden shove in an empty hallway. One chilling account comes from a paranormal investigator who spent the night in Waverly Hills while filming near the nurses' station on the fourth floor. He noticed movement down the hall. Expecting another team member, He called out, but there was no answer. The figure stood motionless, a black silhouette against the gray light seeping through broken windows. Then, slowly, it began to move, not walking, but gliding, closing the distance without a sound. The investigator froze, every instinct screaming to run, until the figure suddenly melted into the wall and vanished. Later, when reviewing the footage, the shadow was nowhere to be seen. Though the investigators' terrified reaction was caught on camera, others have reported a strange phenomenon. When they shine a flashlight down the hallway, the beam seems to bend around something invisible, as though a figure is standing there, blocking the light. And sometimes, that figure begins to move. Who or what is the shadow figure? Some believe it is the spirit of a former patient, doomed to wander the halls for eternity. Others think it is a manifestation of the overwhelming pain and sorrow that permeates the building, an echo of collective suffering given form. A few even suggest something darker, non-human entity drawn to the sanatorium's tragic energy, feeding on fear. The body chute, too, is said to harbor these shifting shadows. This 500-foot tunnel, built to discreetly remove the dead, now feels like a passage into another world. Visitors descending into its depths report shapes following them, keeping pace just beyond the reach of their lights. Disembodied footsteps echo on the concrete floor, and whispers drift through the damp air. Some refuse to enter the chute at all, claiming an oppressive force waits at the bottom. Even outside the building, the sense of unease lingers. From the overgrown grounds, people have seen figures standing in broken windows, watching silently. But when they climb to that floor, they find nothing but dust and decay. The shadow figure of Waverly Hills is not just a ghost story, it's an experience shared by hundreds. Skeptics call it an illusion, a trick of light in a building filled with darkness. But those who have stood in those endless hallways, who have felt the air grow heavy and seen something move that shouldn't move, know better. They speak of a presence that is not bound by walls or time, a thing that waits patiently in the shadows, watching every step you take. Even now, as night falls and the wind howls through broken windows, the sanatorium breathes with a life of its own. The hallways stretch into blackness, the silence broken only by the drip of water and the occasional creak of ancient wood. And if you stay long enough, if you listen hard enough, you might hear it, the soft scrape of something moving in the dark, a shape shifting at the edge of sight. It waits in the corners, in the doorways, in the places where the light does not reach. And when you finally see it, when that darker than dark figure steps into view, you understand why Waverly Hills is a place you never truly leave. Because once you meet the shadow, it follows you, even when you think you've escaped. In the quiet suburban streets of Enfield, London, during the late 1970s, a haunting unfolded that would capture the attention of the world and forever change how we view the paranormal. The Enfield Poltergeist case is one of the most documented and debated hauntings in history. A story involving inexplicable phenomena, frightened children, and determined investigators. It remains a chilling testament to the mystery of the unknown and the thin veil between our reality and something far stranger. It all began in August 1977, in a modest, semi-detached house on Green Street, where the Hodgson family lived. Peggy Hodgson, a single mother, was raising her 4 children: Margaret, 11, Janet, 13, Johnny, 10, and Billy, 7. At first, the disturbances were small and seemingly harmless. Furniture would creak or move slightly. Odd knocking sounds echoed through the house, and objects seemed to shift positions without explanation. But it didn't take long before the events escalated to something far more unsettling. The Hodgson family first noticed the disturbances in the children's bedroom. Janet and Margaret began to experience strange noises and Sightings doors slamming on their own, windows rattling violently, and unseen forces tossing household items across the room. Most frightening were the moments when Janet seemed to lose control, her body convulsing and her voice changing, speaking in deep, guttural tones that sounded nothing like her own. This voice claimed to be that of a man named Bill Wilkins, a former occupant of the house who had passed away decades earlier. The activity intensified quickly. Witnesses reported furniture levitating, toys flying through the air, and heavy objects being thrown. Pegging the source of these events to the poltergeist, local authorities even became involved, with police officers and firemen arriving at the house and experiencing some of the phenomena firsthand. One policeman famously reported hearing knocks coming from an empty fireplace and feeling a cold sensation brush past him. What set the Enfield case apart from other hauntings was the involvement of paranormal investigators, particularly Morris Grass and Guy Lyon Playfair from the Society for Psychical Research. They spent weeks living in the Hodgson house, meticulously documenting occurrences. They captured strange sounds on tape, unexplained knocks, raps, and Janet's eerie, deep-voiced alter ego. Photographs taken during their investigation showed objects in mid-air and shadows with no apparent source. Morris Grass was especially convinced of the authenticity of the phenomena, while others remained skeptical. Some accused the family, particularly Janet and Margaret, of faking the events to gain attention. But the consistency of the occurrences, reported by numerous witnesses, including police officers and journalists, made outright hoax claims difficult to accept. One of the most terrifying incidents happened when Janet's voice would shift into that of Bill Wilkins, who would speak directly to the investigators, sharing details about his life and death that seemed historically accurate. On several occasions, Janet was seen being lifted off the floor by unseen forces, her body twisted in unnatural ways. Cameras failed to capture these moments clearly, but the eyewitness testimonies created an undeniable aura of fear and tension in the house. Neighbors, too, were affected. Several reported strange noises coming from the Hodgson home late at night, and saw furniture moving behind curtained windows. At times, Janet and Margaret were observed speaking in voices that were not their own, exhibiting knowledge they seemingly couldn't possess. Despite the horrors, the Hodgson family never abandoned their home. They continued to live there for over a year amidst the turmoil, desperate for relief and answers. The poltergeist activity eventually subsided by 1979, leaving behind a legacy of questions and a case study that remains one of the most thoroughly investigated hauntings ever. What exactly was the cause of the Enfield poltergeist? Theories abound. Some believe the activity was the result of a genuine supernatural entity, perhaps the restless spirit of Bill Wilkins or another force attached to the house. Others think it was a case of psychokinesis, where Janet's emotional distress unconsciously manifested physical disturbances. Some skeptics argue that the events were exaggerated or faked, fueled by media attention and personal motives. Regardless of the explanation, the case deeply impacted all involved. Janet Hodgson herself, in later years, confirmed that many of the phenomena were real and beyond her control, though she admitted to occasionally playing along when prompted. Morris Grass dedicated much of his life to researching the paranormal because of his experiences at Enfield, while Guy Lyon Playfair authored detailed accounts that helped cement the case's place in paranormal history. The Enfield poltergeist also inspired books, documentaries, and the popular film The Conjuring 2, bringing the story to a global audience and sparking renewed interest in poltergeist phenomena and paranormal investigation. Even today, the house on Green Street stands as a symbol of mystery. Its walls hold secrets that may never be fully understood. For those who lived through it, the events were terrifying, bewildering, and life-changing. For the curious, the Enfield case remains a chilling reminder that sometimes the darkness behind closed doors is more than just silence. The legacy of the Enfield poltergeist endures because it confronts us with fundamental questions. What lies beyond our understanding? Can spirits cross the boundary between life and death? And what happens when an ordinary home becomes a battleground for forces unseen? The answers may remain elusive, but the echoes of those frantic knocks and whispered voices continue to haunt the memory of Enfield, urging us to listen closely to the shadows that linger just beyond the light. In the realm of modern urban legends and spine-chilling paranormal tales, few stories capture the unsettling intersection of everyday technology and the supernatural. Like the eerie case of the creepy elevator ghost caught on CCTV footage across cities worldwide, elevator surveillance cameras have unintentionally documented moments that defy logic and explanation: ghostly apparitions, unexplained shadows, and inexplicable movements that leave viewers questioning the reality of what they've seen. Among these, one particular piece of footage has sparked intense debate, fear, and fascination, becoming an enduring mystery in the paranormal community. The story originates from a high-rise office building in a bustling metropolitan city, where CCTV cameras monitor every floor and common area, including elevators, for security reasons. The building, constructed in the late 20th century, had a reputation for being unremarkably, till one night, when the elevator cameras captured something chilling on a quiet evening shift, with most employees gone and only a skeleton crew remaining. The surveillance footage recorded a sequence that left security staff stunned as the elevator doors closed on an empty floor. The camera inside caught a fleeting glimpse of a figure, woman appearing suddenly in the corner of the elevator. She was dressed in what looked like a vintage white dress, flowing and slightly translucent. Her hair was long and dark, obscuring much of her face, and she seemed to be standing perfectly still, staring directly at the camera. Then, just as suddenly as she appeared, the figure vanished, and the elevator continued its journey without interruption. Security personnel reviewing the tape initially thought it was a trick of the light or a reflection. However, repeated analysis showed no signs of tampering or technical glitches. No other cameras in the elevator or surrounding hallways caught anyone entering or exiting at that time. The building's logs confirmed that no one should have been there. The figure's presence was a mystery, sparking a wave of fear and curiosity throughout the staff. Further investigations uncovered similar reports from previous nights: unexplained flickers on the cameras, sudden cold spots near the elevator banks, and soft, eerie sounds captured faintly on audio recordings. Witnesses described feelings of being watched and sudden chills when near the elevators. Some claimed to have seen shadowy figures just outside the glass doors or heard whispers that vanished when approached. The legend grew, fueled by social media posts and urban exploration forums. Paranormal investigators flocked to the building, hoping to capture definitive proof of the supernatural. They installed additional cameras and sensors, recording late into the night. Many claimed to witness strange phenomena, themselves lights flickering, doors opening and closing without command, and that unmistakable feeling of an unseen presence. One widely shared video shows the elevator doors closing on an empty floor. Suddenly, a misty shape forms inside a blurry outline of a woman. She raises her hand as if reaching out, then dissolves into nothingness. The video has been analyzed by experts who remain divided. Some argue it's an elaborate hoax or digital artifact. Others insist that such a clear apparition cannot be dismissed so easily. Theories about the identity of the elevator ghost abound. Some suggest she is a former resident or employee who met a tragic end within the building's walls, perhaps someone who fell down the elevator shaft or suffered a fatal accident. Others believe she might be a residual haunting, a replay of a past event imprinted on the location, like a ghostly recording. Another theory posits that she could be a spirit trapped between worlds, drawn to the confined, liminal space of the elevator, neither here nor there, forever caught in motion. Psychologists and skeptics attribute the phenomenon to pareidolia, the brain's tendency to see familiar patterns, such as faces or figures, in random visual data, combined with low light conditions and digital noise. The eerie atmosphere and expectation of the supernatural might prime observers to interpret shadows and glitches as ghostly manifestations. Yet, for those who experience the building firsthand, these explanations rarely provide comfort. The elevator ghost story echoes a universal fear, the vulnerability we feel when enclosed in small, confined spaces, completely reliant on machinery. Elevators are places where control is surrendered, and the unknown lurks in the flicker of lights or the hum of cables. When technology, meant to make us safe, becomes a window into the inexplicable, it shakes our sense of reality. This unsettling footage has inspired countless recreations in movies, TV shows, and internet horror videos. It's a reminder that the ghosts of our modern age may not lurk in ancient castles or remote graveyards, but in the everyday, in places we trust and frequent elevators, offices, and the blinking eye of a security camera. Even now, late at night, security guards stationed in that building watch the elevator monitors with a mixture of dread and fascination. The legend of the creepy elevator ghost continues to grow, haunting not just the corridors and shafts but the imaginations of all who glimpse her fleeting form. Whether a trick of light, a fragment of lost soul, or something beyond understanding, the elevator ghost reminds us that some mysteries cannot be locked away, and some shadows refuse to disappear. Route 66, often called a Mother Road, stretches across the heart of America, winding through small towns, open plains, and deserts. It's a highway steeped in history, culture, and countless stories, some joyful, others tragic, and a few downright eerie. Among these tales, one ghost story has captured the imagination of travelers and locals alike for decades. The legend of the disappearing hitchhiker on Route 66. The tale begins with a simple act familiar to many travelers, picking up a hitchhiker along the lonely stretches of Route 66, where gas stations are few and far between, and the night stretches dark and quiet. Stories have long circulated about drivers who encountered a mysterious figure on the roadside. This hitchhiker, usually described as a young woman dressed in old-fashioned clothes, appears suddenly, often at dusk or in the dead of night. According to reports, the hitchhiker stands silently by the roadside, sometimes waving for a ride, sometimes simply standing still, with a haunting expression. She is usually dressed in a white or pale dress, sometimes described as a vintage style from the 1940s or 50s. Her hair long and dark, her face pale and sorrowful. Drivers, moved by her appearance and plight, stop to offer her a ride. Once inside the vehicle, the hitchhiker remains quiet or speaks softly, giving only vague details about where she needs to go. The atmosphere inside the car grows heavy, the air thick with unease, yet the drivers are compelled to help her. They drive 4 miles, through twisting roads and stretches of empty highway, only to find that when they reach the destination, or sometimes even before they glance back, and the hitchhiker has vanished without a trace. Sometimes she disappears right before their eyes, leaving no sign she was ever there. Other times, the drivers reach the address she provided, only to learn that the woman they picked up had died years earlier, often in a tragic accident along Route 66 itself. One of the most enduring versions of this legend comes from the stretches of highway near Kingman, Arizona. Here, drivers recount picking up a young woman who asks to be taken to a nearby town. She is quiet, almost melancholic, and her dress seems out of place in the modern world. When they reach the address, they are met with surprise or disbelief. House belongs to a family who remembers a girl who died decades ago in a car crash nearby. Her life cut short on that very road. The story takes on many forms and variations. In some tellings, the hitchhiker leaves behind a personal item, a scarf, a glove, a small locket, tonally, for the driver to realize later that it is old, worn, and belonged to someone long gone. In others, the hitchhiker is heard humming an old tune or reciting a poem, her voice filled with longing and sorrow. Over the years, the disappearing hitchhiker has become a symbol of Route 66's haunted history, a ghostly reminder of lives lost on the road and the unresolved stories that linger in the desert air. The legend taps into deep human fears and hopes, the vulnerability of travelers, the kindness of strangers, and the mystery of what lies beyond death. Skeptics often dismiss the tales as urban myths, a mix of folklore and the human tendency to create stories to explain the unknown. They point out that the isolation and eerie quiet of long highway stretches can play tricks on the mind, and that drivers traveling alone at night may misinterpret shadows or passing lights as something supernatural. But for those who have experienced these encounters firsthand, skepticism feels distant and cold. Many drivers who tell their stories describe a profound feeling of sadness, a sense of being watched, or the chill of something not quite human. Some say that after picking up the hitchhiker, Their cars inexplicably malfunction or their journeys take on a strange, dreamlike quality. The disappearing hitchhiker on Route 66 is not just a ghost story. It is a cultural touchstone. It reflects the hopes and fears of generations who have traveled the highway. A metaphor for journeys taken and lives interrupted. The figure of the hitchhiker herself embodies the fragile boundary between life and death, between the known and the unknown. Route 66 has inspired countless songs, movies, and stories, many celebrating its freedom and adventure, others mourning the tragedies along its path. The ghostly hitchhiker adds a layer of mystery and melancholy to this rich tapestry. She reminds travelers that the road is not just a way to get from one place to another, but a place where stories live and memories linger. Even today, as the highway has changed with time and modern roads have bypassed many of its stretches, the legend endures. Drivers still share tales of the pale figure by the roadside, and some travelers report sensing a presence in the back seat during long drives through the night. Whether you believe in ghosts or see the disappearing hitchhiker as a tale born from imagination and fear, her story invites us to pause and reflect. It reminds us that the roads we travel carry more than just our vehicles. They carry the echoes of those who came before us, their hopes, their fears, and their unfinished journeys. So the next time you find yourself driving along a lonely stretch of Route 66, keep an eye on the roadside. You might just see a figure standing silently in the twilight, waiting for a ride. And if you stop to offer help, be prepared. You may find she disappears before you reach your destination. A haunting reminder that some travelers never truly arrive. In the quiet, rural stretches of Texas, where narrow country roads wind through fields and creeks, there is a bridge that locals whisper about in hushed tones, a place where the air feels heavy and the darkness seems to watch with unseen eyes. This bridge, known only by those who have lived nearby for generations, is home to a chilling legend. The Weeping Woman. The story begins many decades ago, in a time when the area was little more than farmland, dotted with small communities. According to local lore, a young woman lived nearby with her husband and two small children. She was known for her beauty and kindness, and her family seemed happy, at least from the outside. But beneath the surface, tragedy was brewing. Some say her husband grew cold and distant, perhaps because of another woman. Others claim he abandoned her completely, leaving her heart broken and desperate. Whatever the truth, it all led to a night of unimaginable sorrow. One stormy evening, the young woman set out across the old wooden bridge with her children in tow. Rain poured in sheets, lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled through the valley like an angry god. No one knows exactly what happened on that bridge. Some believe she intended to flee and start a new life, while others whisper a darker tale that in her despair, she decided her children should never suffer as she had. What is certain is that by morning, all three were dead. Their bodies were found in the creek below, washed against the muddy banks. The woman's body lay nearby, her white dress soaked and torn, her eyes wide open as if staring into an eternal void. Since that night, locals say her spirit has never left. Drivers who cross the bridge after dark often report hearing the faint sound of sobbing, carried on the wind like a mournful lullaby. At first, it's barely there, almost like a trick of the mind, but as you approach the center of the bridge, it grows louder, heartbreaking wails of pure grief echoing through the night. Those who dare to stop their cars sometimes see a figure in white, standing at the edge, her head bowed, her long hair hanging like a curtain over her face. She weeps softly, her shoulders trembling, and then, in an instant, she vanishes into the mist rising from the water. Some witnesses claim she is not always so passive. There are stories of drivers who slowed down after seeing her figure in the road ahead, only for her to glide toward their car with unnatural speed, her face twisted in anguish. One man swore that when she reached his window, her eyes were hollow sockets, black and empty, and her mouth opened in a silent scream before she vanished. He never drove that road again. Locals also warn of the cold spots. Even in the blistering heat of a Texas summer, the center of the bridge is said to chill to an icy degree when she appears. Some have seen their breath fogging in the air, the steering wheel slick with condensation, while moments earlier, the night was warm. Others report their car radios going haywire, stations switching on their own, white noise hissing like a voice trying to break through, cell phones lose signal without reason, and headlights flicker, as if the very air is draining power from everything around. Perhaps the most terrifying accounts come from those who have heard the sound of small footsteps on the bridge, light and quick, as though children are running in the darkness. If you stop and listen, the splashing of water follows, like little feet leaping into the creek below. More than one person has claimed to hear a faint laughter mixed with the mother's cries, a cruel echo of life before tragedy struck. Paranormal investigators have flocked to the site, drawn by its reputation as one of Texas's most haunted places. They've captured strange phenomena, photographs showing misty shapes, audio recordings of sobs and whispers, and unexplained EMP spikes on the bridge. Skeptics argue it's nothing more than wind patterns, wildlife, and the power of suggestion. But even the most hardened doubters admit the atmosphere is different, here thick, heavy, almost alive with something unseen. Folklorists have tied the story of the weeping woman to older legends, most notably La Llorona, the ghostly mother from Mexican folklore who drowned her children in a fit of rage and now wanders riversides in eternal grief. Some believe the Texas bridge haunting is a local manifestation of this ancient tale, carried north by generations of storytelling. Whether connected or not, the similarities are undeniable. A sorrowful woman in white, a body of water, and a cry that chills the soul. For those who live nearby, the legend is not just a story, it's a warning. Parents tell their children to avoid the bridge after dark, and even grown men admit they won't cross it alone at night. Truckers who take the back roads late in the evening have been known to speed across without slowing down, their eyes fixed straight ahead, praying they don't see a pale figure waiting in the shadows. To this day, the weeping woman remains one of the most enduring and terrifying ghostly presences in Texas lore. Some say she is searching for her lost children, doomed to wander until she finds them. Others think she seeks revenge, lashing out at those who remind her of the life she lost. Whatever her purpose, one thing is certain. If you find yourself on that lonely bridge under a moonless sky, and you hear the sound of soft weeping over the rush of the creek below, look back. Because if you do, you might see her, standing in white, her tears glistening like silver, her sorrow reaching across the veil of death to pull you into her eternal grief. Hospitals are places of life and death, where emotions run high and the veil between worlds feels thin. Perhaps that's why they've always been fertile ground for ghost stories. But one particular case has haunted the internet and the memories of those who witnessed it. The security camera footage from a hospital where something unexplainable was caught on film a night that left even seasoned staff trembling. The story begins in a large metropolitan hospital, a facility known for its modern technology and round-the-clock care. Like most hospitals, its hallways are monitored by an extensive network of security cameras, ensuring patient safety and allowing staff to keep watch over quiet corridors during the late-night hours. On one particular evening, a security guard named Daniel was assigned to the overnight shift, stationed in a small room filled with monitors displaying the hospital's various wings. It was a routine night sight, uneventful till just after 3 a.m. Daniel was sipping coffee when a movement on one of the screens caught his attention. The camera was focused on a hallway leading to the intensive care unit. The corridor was empty, its white walls gleaming under fluorescent lights. But as Daniel stared at the grainy feed, he noticed something unusual. A figure slowly appearing at the far end of the hallway. At first, he thought it was a nurse, though the shift was light, and no one should have been there. The figure seemed strange tall, impossibly thin, and moving with an unnatural grace. Its head hung low, and its arms dangled limply at its sides as it glided toward the camera. Daniel leaned closer. Something was wrong with its appearance. The figure wasn't solid. It was blurry, almost translucent, as though the camera lens couldn't fully capture it. There was no sound, but Daniel swore he could feel something, an icy sensation, creeping through the room, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. He blinked, hoping it was a glitch in the feed. But when he looked again, the figure was closer, halfway down the hall now, its form rippling like heat waves. And then, for the first time, it lifted its head. What Daniel saw froze him in place. The figure had no eyes, just empty hollows where its sockets should have been. Its mouth gaped unnaturally wide, as if caught in an eternal scream. He scrambled for the radio, calling for a nearby nurse to check the hallway. But as his voice cracked through the static, the figure stopped moving. It stood completely still, its head tilted toward the camera, staring directly into the lens, as though it could see him watching. The nurse who responded reported back moments later. The hallway was empty. There was no one there. Daniel stared at the monitor in disbelief, because the figure was still on the screen, unmoving, locked in that horrifying stare. He told the nurse to check again, and she swore she had walked the entire corridor. No one, nothing. Then, without warning, the lights in the hallway flickered on the screen. The figure began to move again, but not toward the camera this time. It drifted toward one of the ICU rooms, the door sliding open as if pushed by an unseen hand. Daniel checked the patient registry. That room belonged to a man in critical condition, one who had been barely clinging to life for days. Daniel's gut twisted as the figure slipped inside the room and vanished from view. Heart pounding, Daniel switched to the room's interior camera. At first, the patient lay motionless, hooked to machines that beeped steadily in the background. Then, for the briefest moment, something dark passed across the lens, a shadow that stretched unnaturally long before disappearing. Seconds later, the monitors began to wail, alarms shrieking as the patient flatlined. Daniel slammed his hand on the alert button, and nurses rushed in. But by the time they arrived, the man was gone. They worked furiously to revive him, but it was no use. He was pronounced dead at 3:15 a.m., just minutes after the figure appeared on camera. Security protocol required Daniel to save the footage for review. When the head of security arrived later that morning, they played it back together. What they saw made their blood run cold. The figure was there, exactly as Daniel described, drifting through the empty hallway, staring into the camera, then disappearing into the patient's room moments before his death. They watched it several times, hoping for an explanation, pixelation, a trick of light, but the image remained horrifyingly clear. The incident sparked rumors among the staff. Some said it was a death omen, a spirit that comes to collect souls at the brink of death. Others believed it was a restless ghost of someone who had died in the hospital, condemned to wander its sterile halls forever. A few even whispered that the hospital itself had absorbed decades of grief and suffering, giving birth to something that fed on despair. But whispers spread quickly. Other guards admitted to seeing strange shapes on the monitors, before a flicker of movement where none should be, shadows that didn't belong. Nurses spoke of cold spots in the ice, of hearing footsteps echoing down empty corridors, and the sound of faint sobbing when no one was around. As for the footage, it mysteriously disappeared from the archives within days. Some claim it was erased deliberately to avoid panic. Others insist that even technology can't hold on to something not meant to be seen. But those who were there that night will never forget what they saw: the figure gliding down the hallway, hollow eyes fixed on the camera, carrying with it the weight of something that does not belong to this world. To this day, the hospital remains operational, its lights burning through the long nights. Patients sleep in their beds, unaware of what may walk the halls when the clock strikes 3, and in the small hours of the morning, when the corridors fall silent and the cameras hum softly in the dark. Some security guards swear they still catch glimpses of flicker on the screen. A shape standing too still, too empty, watching them from the other side. Nursing homes are meant to be places of comfort and care, where the elderly live out their remaining days in peace. Yet, for those who have worked the night shift, these halls often carry a sense of eerie stillness. The creak of floorboards, the hum of fluorescent lights, and the faint sounds of distant breathing combine to create an atmosphere that can feel unsettling when darkness falls. It was in such an environment that the story of the moving wheelchair began, a tale that has since spread through whispers, late-night conversations, and grainy security footage that no one can quite explain. It happened in a small-town nursing home, the kind of facility where everyone knew each other by name. Most of the residents had been there for years, and the staff treated them like family. Among the patients was an elderly man named Walter, who had spent the last decade confined to a wheelchair after a series of strokes left him unable to walk. Walter was known for his dry humor and kind eyes, a gentle soul who loved listening to old jazz records and telling stories about his youth. But one winter night, Walter passed away quietly in his sleep. His death was peaceful, his face serene, as if he had simply drifted into another dream. The staff mourned his passing, and by morning, his room was emptied, his belongings packed away. His wheelchair, a sturdy metal frame with worn leather padding, was placed in the hallway outside his old room, waiting to be cleaned before being stored away. For 2 days, the wheelchair sat untouched. Then came the night shift on the third day, a night that none of the staff would ever forget. The nursing home was quiet as usual, most residents asleep, their rooms dimly lit by night lights. A nurse named Emily made her rounds down the east wing, clipboard in hand, shoes squeaking softly on the polished floor. As she passed Walter's old room, she felt a sudden chill. It wasn't unusual. Older buildings often had drafts. Still, she quickened her pace, eager to finish her rounds. That's when she heard the faint creak of metal wheels rolling against the tile. Emily stopped, straining her ears. The sound came from behind her, from the hallway she had just walked through. Slowly, she turned. The wheelchair that had been sitting against the wall was gone. Her heart began to race. She scanned the hall, and then she saw it. The wheelchair, several feet away from where she had left it, its wheels glistening under the fluorescent lights. It was moving slowly, steadily down the corridor, as if pushed by invisible hands. Emily froze, watching in disbelief, as the chair glided past open doorways, its wheels turning with deliberate precision. There was no draft strong enough to move something that heavy, and the floor was perfectly level. She called out, her voice trembling, "Hello, is someone there?" There was no answer, only the soft squeal of the wheels against the tile. Summoning her courage, Emily walked toward the chair, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. Just as she reached out to grab it, the wheelchair stopped abruptly, as if aware of her presence. She stood there, for what felt like an eternity, staring at the motionless frame, her breath visible in the sudden cold that had settled around her. Finally, she gripped the handles, wheeled it back to its original spot, and hurried away, telling herself it must have been a trick of her mind. But that wasn't the end of it. An hour later, while checking the security monitors in the nurse's station, Emily nearly screamed. The wheelchair was moving again, captured on the grainy black and white feed. The footage showed the chair rolling slowly down the hall, pausing at doorways as if looking in on the sleeping residents. At one point, it stopped completely and turned on its own, swiveling to face the camera directly before continuing its ghostly journey. Emily called another nurse, Brian, to witness it. They both stared in stunned silence as the wheelchair approached the far end of the hall and stopped in front of a door that led to Walter's old room. The chair remained there for several minutes before the feed flickered, and when it cleared, the wheelchair was gone. Panicked, the two staff members ran down the hall, only to find the chair sitting neatly against the wall outside the room, as if it had never moved. Word spread quickly among the staff. Some were curious, others terrified. Maintenance workers checked for drafts, uneven floors, even mechanical malfunctions, but they found nothing. The wheels were stiff. It would have taken a strong push to move it at all. Yet the video footage was undeniable. The administration quietly saved the recording, though no one ever made it public. After that night, strange things continued to happen. Call lights in empty rooms would flash for no reason. Nurses reported hearing faint jazz music late at night, even though the radios were turned off. Some swore they saw a shadow in the shape of a man sitting in the wheelchair when they passed it in the dim glow of the hallway lights. A few even claimed to hear a gravelly voice chuckle softly before fading into silence. Eventually, the wheelchair was removed from the building and stored in a locked basement, but the activity didn't stop completely. Staff still speak of cold spots near Walter's old room, and some believe his spirit lingers, perhaps unwilling to leave the place where he spent so many years. Maybe he simply wants to take one last ride through the halls he once knew so well. To this day, new employees are warned about the moving wheelchair, though many dismiss it as nothing more than a ghost story to spook the rookies. Still, those who have seen the footage, or heard the wheels creaking in the dead of night, know the truth. Sometimes, even after death, we hold on to the things that gave us freedom, and some spirits refuse to stop moving, even when their journey should be over. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, is a name etched into the history of the United States, a place where the bloodiest battle of the Civil War unfolded in July 1863. More than 50,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or went missing during those 3 days of relentless fighting. Today, the small town has become a site of remembrance, its fields and monuments honoring the dead. But along with its historic significance comes something darker: tales of spirits lingering where lives were cut short. Among these stories, one of the most chilling is that of the ghost child seen wandering near the old battlefields. The story begins near the site known as Devil's Den, a rocky outcrop that played a brutal role in the battle. The stones still seem to echo with the cries of soldiers who fought and died there, and it is one of the most haunted spots in Gettysburg. Many visitors have reported strange occurrences, unexplained mists, phantom gunshots, and shadowy figures moving among the rocks. But for some, the most unnerving experience is an encounter with a child who should not be there. Eyewitness accounts describe the same figure, a young boy, no older than 10, dressed in tattered 19th century clothing. His face is pale, his expression distant, and his presence often catches people off guard because he appears so solid, so real until he vanishes without a sound. One such encounter happened to a couple visiting the battlefield late in the afternoon. They had wandered away from the main tour path to explore the rocky terrain. As they climbed over boulders, they noticed a boy standing a short distance away, watching them silently. At first, they assumed he was part of a reenactment, or perhaps the child of another visitor. The boy wore a loose shirt and suspenders, his pants worn and muddy, his shoes barely holding together. When they smiled and waved, he didn't respond, just stood there, head tilted slightly, eyes fixed on them with a strange, vacant stare. The couple decided to approach him, worried that he might be lost. But as they drew closer, the boy stepped behind a large rock. When they reached the spot seconds later, he was gone. There was no sound of footsteps, no rustling of leaves, just empty ground and still air. The couple searched the area for several minutes, calling out, but the boy had vanished as if he'd never been there at all. Later, when they shared their story with a park guide, they were told they were not the first to see him. Some believe the ghost child might have been a drummer boy, one of the countless youths who served in non-combat roles during the war. These children carried messages, tended to the wounded, or played drums to keep soldiers in formation. Though young, they were far from safe. Many were killed in the chaos of battle. Others think the boy could have been a local child caught in the crossfire, his short life ending amid the thunder of cannons and musket fire. Whatever his story, it seems his spirit lingers, bound to the place where fear and violence consumed his final moments. Visitors who encounter the ghost often report a feeling of overwhelming sadness, as if the child's sorrow seeps into their bones. Some even claim to hear faint laughter or humming before he appears, an eerie echo of a life interrupted. Others say the air grows cold, even on the hottest summer day, and that their cameras malfunction when they try to take a picture of him. A few lucky or unlucky tourists have captured what they believe to be evidence: blurry images of a small figure, misty and translucent, standing among the rocks. The legend has grown so strong that paranormal investigators frequently visit Devil's Den and other parts of the battlefield in hopes of encountering the child. Many bring thermal cameras and audio recorders, and some claim to have captured disembodied voices, a soft, high-pitched giggle or a whisper saying, "Come play." Others report hearing the rhythmic tapping of a drum, faint but distinct, drifting across the fields long after dark. What makes the ghost child so unsettling is not just his presence, but the contrast he represents. In a place associated with war and carnage, his small figure is a reminder of innocence lost. of lives that should have been far removed from battle, but were drawn into its horrors nonetheless. His appearance stirs something deeper than fear. It sparks a sense of melancholy, a longing for answers that history cannot provide. Even now, as the sun sets over Gettysburg and the monuments cast long shadows across the fields, many believe the boy still wanders the rocky ground, searching for something or someone he will never find. Perhaps he looks for his regiment, or his family, or perhaps he doesn't know he's gone at all. Whatever the case, those who have seen him say one thing with certainty. When you lock eyes with that ghostly child, you feel the weight of the past pressing in, as if time itself has folded to let you glimpse the lingering sorrow of a soul that cannot rest. So if you ever visit Gettysburg and find yourself near Devil's Den at dusk, listen closely. You might hear the faint beat of a drum or the sound of small feet on the stones. And if you see a boy in old clothes standing alone among the rocks, remember, he is not a reenactor, and when you look away, he will be gone. But the memory of his empty gaze will stay with you long after you've left the battlefield. A haunting reminder that the echoes of history are never truly silent. In the quiet suburbs of a small town, nestled among rows of modest houses, a family's ordinary life was shattered by an unsettling discovery. A demon face caught on video in their basement. The footage, which began as a simple attempt to capture a home renovation project, quickly turned into a chilling nightmare that would haunt the family and ignite fear throughout the community. It started innocently enough. The Johnson family had recently purchased an old house, drawn to its charm and affordable price. The basement, however, was in dire need of repair. Damp and dark, it had clearly been neglected for years. Determined to transform the space into a comfortable recreation room, the family decided to document the renovation for their personal records, and perhaps for sharing with friends and family online. John, the father, set up a small digital camera in the corner of the basement, hoping to capture time-lapse footage of the work. Over several days, the camera recorded their progress, tearing down old paneling, repairing walls, and installing new lighting. The project was tedious but uneventful till the night after they finished most of the demolition work. One evening, after the children had gone to bed and the house was quiet, John reviewed the footage to check for any missed details. As he fast-forwarded through the video, something strange caught his eye. Around 2:33 a.m., a dark, shadowy figure appeared near the far wall of the basement. It wasn't a person. Instead, it was a terrifying face, twisted, contorted, with glowing eyes and a mouth twisted into a sinister grin. The demonic visage seemed to flicker and pulse, as if alive, staring directly into the camera. John's heart pounded as he rewound and played the clip over and over. The face lingered just seconds before fading away, but its impact was undeniable. He showed the footage to his wife, Lisa, whose face went pale the moment she saw it. They decided to keep the video private, unsure whether to believe what they had witnessed or dismiss it as a trick of light and shadows. That night, strange things began to happen in the house. Doors slammed shut on their own, cold spots appeared without explanation, and whispers seemed to echo from the basement walls. The family's dog refused to go near the stairs leading down and would growl uncontrollably whenever anyone descended. Objects moved inexplicably. Tools left on the floor would be found in different places the next morning. Lisa confided in a close friend who suggested the house might be haunted or worse, cursed. Though skeptical at first, the evidence piled up. The family called in a paranormal investigator who brought specialized equipment to the house. During one late-night session in the basement, the footage of the demon face became the centerpiece of the investigation. The investigator noted that the image was unlike typical ghostly apparitions. It was malevolent, seemingly a dark entity, manifesting visually rather than as an ethereal shadow. The basement, he explained, might be a portal or focal point for this negative energy. Local historians added another layer to the mystery. The house had a troubled past decades ago. It was the site of a gruesome crime where a man was accused of practicing occult rituals in the basement, before disappearing without a trace. Neighbors recalled strange noises and unexplained lights coming from the house during that time. It seemed possible that something dark had taken root in the foundation, despite efforts to cleanse the house. Spiritual rituals, blessings from local clergy, and even professional exorcisms. The demonic presence refused to leave. The demon face appeared repeatedly in the basement video, each time more vivid and menacing. The family's peace was shattered. Sleep became impossible, and fear seeped into every corner of their lives. Eventually, the Johnsons made the painful decision to move, leaving behind the home that had become a nightmare. They handed over the video footage to paranormal researchers and documentary filmmakers intrigued by the case. The demon face video circulated widely online, sparking debate and fascination, drawing skeptics and believers alike. Some dismissed the video as clever editing or camera artifacts, but those who experienced the haunting firsthand are certain of its authenticity. The demon face remains a chilling reminder of the dark forces that can lurk unseen beneath our feet, waiting for a moment to reveal themselves. In the quiet, forgotten basement of an ordinary house, the boundary between our world and something far more sinister was breached and captured forever on film. Aokigahara Forest, also known as the Sea of Trees, lies at the base of Mount Fuji in Japan. By day, it is hauntingly beautiful, a dense expanse of ancient trees, tangled roots, and moss-covered rocks that seem frozen in time. But beneath its serene appearance, Aokigahara carries a heavy darkness. It is infamous as one of the most haunted places in the world, a location where countless souls have chosen to end their lives. One of the most terrifying is the tale of the specter, said to wander its depths. It begins like many urban legends. Someone goes missing in the forest, and search parties fail to find them. Aokigahara's terrain is treacherous. Thick vegetation muffles sound, and magnetic anomalies make compasses unreliable. Even seasoned hikers can become disoriented within minutes. But this story doesn't end with someone vanishing. It begins there. A few years ago, a man named Hiroshi entered Aokigahara, carrying nothing but a small backpack and a camera. His family described him as quiet, troubled by personal failures, and struggling under the weight of depression. When he didn't return home, the authorities were called. Days of searching turned up nothing, no footprints, no signs of where he went. Eventually, the search was called off. Another soul lost to the forest, people assumed. Months later, hikers reported strange encounters near a little-used path deep within Aokigahara. One couple claimed they heard crying soft, almost childlike echoing through the trees. They followed the sound, thinking someone might be hurt. But the deeper they went, the louder the crying became, until it turned into laughter, high-pitched, chilling, and echoing from all directions. Terrified, they fled the forest, never looking back. Then came the videos. Urban explorers often visit Aokigahara, documenting their experiences for YouTube. One such video surfaced, gaining millions of views before it was mysteriously taken down. It showed two men hiking through the forest, joking nervously as they filmed the eerie silence. At one point, they stumbled upon something strange. A strip of white cloth tied around a tree trunk. This is common in the forest. People mark trails, in case they change their minds about dying and want to find their way out. But as the camera panned up, the cloth seemed to stretch far higher than any normal strip could. When the man filming looked closer, his voice trembled. The cloth wasn't cloth at all, it was a sleeve. And hanging from the tree, swaying gently, was the body of a man. The two men whispered frantically, deciding whether to call authorities. Then, something moved. The hanging body twitched on, like a rope swinging in the wind, but as if it were alive. One arm bent slowly at the elbow, jerking in an unnatural angle. The head lolled to one side, and the mouth opened. The explorers ran, their panicked breathing and snapping branches filling the final seconds of the footage. Just before the video cut off, the camera tilted, and for a brief instant, a figure appeared in the distance. Tall, impossibly thin, with limbs too long for its body. Standing among the trees and watching, paranormal experts and local guides have heard similar stories. Some say the spirit of those who die in the forest becomes a urea, restless ghost, bound by anger and sorrow. Unlike Western ghosts, which are often pale and ethereal, urea are said to be twisted by suffering, their features distorted into something monstrous. Witnesses describe a figure dressed in tattered clothing, its face hidden behind long black hair, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet with broken strings. Those who meet its gaze speak of an overwhelming sense of despair, as if the forest itself is whispering for them to stay forever. Hikers have reported strange phenomena: whispers calling their name, footsteps following them when no one is there, and sudden temperature drops so severe their breath fogs in the summer heat. Some claim to hear the snapping of ropes from above, followed by laughter echoing through the trees. Others speak of being lured off the main paths by distant voices, only to realize they've been walking in circles for hours. One of the most chilling encounters came from a man named Kenji, an experienced hiker who visited Aokigahara to photograph its beauty. He ventured deep into the forest, far from the tourist trails. As the light faded, he began to feel uneasy. The silence was absolute: no wind, no birds, no insects. Then he noticed something strange. Red strings tied to branches, crisscrossing through the trees like a web. He followed them, thinking they might lead to a campsite. Instead, they led to a clearing, and in the center hung a rope from a tree branch, swaying slightly, though there was no breeze. Beneath it stood a figure, facing away from him. It was wearing a white garment, and its long black hair fell like a curtain. Thinking someone needed help, Kenji called out. Slowly, the figure turned. Its face was not human. The skin was gray and stretched too tightly across its skull. Its eyes were hollow black pits, and its mouth split open in a grin that reached almost to its ears. Kenji stumbled backward, fumbling for his camera. When he looked up again, the figure was gone, but the rope was still swaying. He fled the forest, leaving his gear behind. Later, when he checked the few photos he'd managed to take, one showed something impossible. The figure crouched low behind a tree, grinning straight into the lens. Today, locals warn visitors to respect the forest and never stray from the paths. They believe the spirits of those who died there are angry, desperate to drag others into their eternal sorrow. Whether you call it legend or truth, one thing is certain: Aokigahara is not just a forest, it is a graveyard of broken souls. And if you wander too far into its depths, you may hear the whisper of something watching, waiting, and longing to make you part of its endless silence. It was an ordinary night for Takumi, a taxi driver working the late shift in Tokyo. The city pulsed with neon lights and the steady hum of traffic. But beyond the busy districts, the streets grew quieter as the hour crept past midnight. Takumi had driven these roads for years, ferrying businessmen, couples, and the occasional late-night wanderer, but nothing in his experience could have prepared him for the passenger who would change his life forever. The night began like any other. Takumi picked up a few fares from Shinjuku and Ginza, earning enough to make the shift worthwhile. By 2:30 a.m., the streets were nearly empty. He decided to circle through a quieter part of the city near the river. Before heading home, as he drove past a dimly lit stretch of road, he saw Hara, young woman, standing near a telephone pole. Her head slightly bowed, her long black hair covering part of her face. She wore a white dress that hung loosely, its hem brushing her ankles. Something about her posture seemed off, but Takumi slowed anyway. It wasn't unusual to find someone stranded this late at night. He rolled down the window and called out, "Miss, do you need a ride?" The woman lifted her head slowly. Her face was pale, almost too pale, but she nodded without a word and walked toward the car. When she opened the door and slid into the back seat, Takumi caught a faint, strange scent like damp earth mixed with something metallic. He brushed it off, assuming she had been walking in the rain earlier. "Where to?" he asked, glancing at her through the rear-view mirror. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then, in a soft voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Please, take me home." Her tone carried an eerie weight, but Takumi simply nodded. "Sure, what's the address?" She hesitated before murmuring an address in an older part of town, miles away from where they were. He typed it into his GPS and began driving. For the first few minutes, the ride was silent, except for the hum of the engine and the faint crackle of the radio. Takumi tried to make small talk, asking if she had been out with friends or if she needed to call anyone, but she didn't respond. When he glanced in the mirror again, his stomach tightened. The woman was staring out the window, her face unreadable, her lips slightly parted, as if she were silently mouthing words he couldn't hear. The road grew darker as they moved away from the city lights. Then, the dashcam, which Takumi always kept running for safety, started to glitch. The screen flickered, distorting the image for a split second before returning to normal. He frowned, but kept driving. "Almost there," he said, more to himself than to her. As they neared the destination, something strange happened. The GPS froze. The map stopped updating, even though the car was still moving. At the same moment, Takumi noticed the temperature inside the taxi had dropped. His breath fogged slightly in the air, though the heater was on. He looked in the rearview mirror again and nearly slammed on the brakes. The back seat was empty. Takumi's heart pounded. He whipped his head around, but there was no one there. No door had opened. No sound had been made. She was simply gone. Trembling, he pulled over to the side of the road and tried to make sense of what had happened. Had she slipped out without him noticing? Impossible. The child locks were engaged. His hands shook as he reached for the dashcam screen to review the footage. What he saw made his blood run cold. The video showed the woman sitting silently in the back seat, just as he remembered. Then, at the exact moment he felt the chill, the footage changed. Her head turned toward the camera in one slow, unnatural motion. Her hair slid aside, revealing a face that was no longer human. Her eyes were black voids, and her mouth stretched impossibly wide, splitting her pale skin as if tearing itself open. For a few seconds, the image glitched violently, as if the camera couldn't process what it was seeing. Then came the final frame before she vanished. Her face pressed close to the lens. Grinning, her black eyes staring straight into his. Takumi slammed the dashcam off, his heart hammering so loudly he thought it might burst. He drove home without looking in the mirror again, every instinct screaming for him not to glance behind. That night, he barely slept, replaying the events over and over in his mind. The next day, curiosity overcame his fear. He researched the address she had given him. What he found left him trembling. It was the site of a small house that had burned down decades ago. The fire had killed a young woman who lived there alone after her left her on their wedding day. According to local stories, her spirit still wanders the streets, searching for a way home. Takumi tried to convince himself it was all coincidence, that the footage was some kind of error, that his mind was playing tricks on him. But when he finally worked up the courage to review the full dashcam recording on his computer, something else appeared. In the last few seconds of the video, after he had pulled over and the back seat was empty, the camera captured a reflection in the rear window, a pale face with black eyes, grinning as if she had never really left the car. Takumi no longer drives nights. He removed the dashcam, but sometimes, when he's on a quiet road after dark, he swears he hears a whisper from the back seat, a soft voice, saying the same words she said that night. "Please, take me home." The Valeska Axe Murder House stands quietly on a corner in the small town of Valeska, Iowa. Its white wooden frame and unassuming porch giving no hint of the horror that unfolded within its walls more than a century ago. But those who know its history, or those who have spent a night inside, will tell you that the house is anything but ordinary. It is a place frozen in time, steeped in tragedy, and haunted by something far darker than memory. The story begins on the night of June 10, 1912. Josiah Moore, his wife Sarah, their 4 children, and 2 young house guests attended a Children's Day service at the local church before returning home. It was a warm summer evening in Valeska, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But by the next morning, the house on East 2nd Street would become the site of one of the most gruesome and enduring mysteries in American history. Sometime after midnight, an unknown intruder crept into the home while the family slept. Armed with Josiah's own axe, the killer struck with brutal force, slaughtering all 8 occupants, 6 children, and 2 adults in their beds. The crime shocked the nation. Despite an intense investigation and several trials, no one was ever convicted. The identity and motive of the murderer remain unknown to this day. The house was left to stand as a chilling reminder of the violence that shattered this quiet town. Over time, the Villisca Axe Murder House gained a reputation as one of the most haunted places in America. Visitors began reporting strange occurrences, footsteps echoing in empty rooms, whispers drifting through the darkness, doors opening and closing on their own. Some claimed to feel an oppressive presence, as if the very walls were heavy with sorrow and rage. But among the many tales of paranormal activity, one stands out: the story of the phantom that appears in the dead of night. It usually begins the same way. The house is silent, the lights are off, and a visitor, often a paranormal investigator or a curious guest, spending the night, sits alone, waiting. Hours pass, the air grows colder, and then the sounds begin. Faint at first, creaking floorboards, the distant thud of something heavy dragging across the floor. Some hear children giggling softly, their laughter echoing faintly, as if carried on a breeze that doesn't exist. Others hear the rhythmic sound of an axe striking wood, over and over, a hollow thump that reverberates through the empty rooms. One investigator, a man named Travis, came to the house determined to debunk its ghostly reputation. Armed with cameras, audio recorders, and infrared sensors, he set up his equipment and settled into the darkened living room. For hours, nothing happened. The only sounds were the hum of his devices and the occasional groan of the old house settling. Then, around 2:15 a.m., his recorder picked up something faint, almost imperceptible at first. A whisper. He leaned in, straining to hear, and the words became clear. "Come upstairs." Travis froze. His cameras showed nothing unusual, but the whisper was undeniable. Captured on the recorder in a voice that was not his own. Heart pounding, he decided to follow the sound. The wooden stairs creaked under his weight as he climbed to the second floor, where the bedrooms remained preserved as they were in 1912. He reached the landing, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, and that's when he saw it. At the end of the hallway, near the children's room, a figure stood, a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his form cloaked in shadow. His head was tilted slightly, as if studying Travis, though his face was obscured. For a moment, neither moved. Then, without a sound, the figure stepped backward into the room and vanished. Travis bolted down the stairs and out of the house, leaving his equipment behind. When he returned with his team the next day, they reviewed the footage. The hallway camera had gone to static at the exact moment the figure appeared. On the audio recorder, however, there was something else: a low, guttural laugh, followed by the sound of an axe striking wood, 3 times before the tape cut off. Stories like Travis's are not uncommon. Countless visitors have reported seeing the same shadowy figure, always upstairs, always near the children's room. Some believe it is the spirit of the killer, doomed to wander the house where his unspeakable crime was committed. Others think it is something darker, a malevolent force drawn to the violence, feeding on fear. Whatever it is, those who encounter it describe the same feeling, an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the air itself grows heavier, pressing down on them, stealing the breath from their lungs. Children's voices are also frequently heard. Guests report hearing giggles, whispers, and the sound of tiny footsteps running across the floor when no one is there. Toys left in the rooms are sometimes moved during the night, rolling across the floor as if nudged by unseen hands. Some visitors claim to feel small fingers tugging at their clothing, or the brush of something cold against their skin. Despite its grisly past, the Villisca Axe Murder House welcomes visitors and overnight stays for those brave enough to endure its haunted halls. But those who have experienced the phantom say no amount of curiosity is worth the terror of what lingers there. They warn that the house is not just a relic of tragedy, it is a place where the past is alive, where echoes of violence replay endlessly in the shadows, and where something watches from the darkness, waiting for the next soul to step inside and listen to the whispers that never fade. Even now, as the wind rattles the old windows and the wooden floors creak under the weight of nothing, the house seems to breathe with its own dark life. And if you dare to enter after midnight, you may hear the laughter of unseen children. The heavy footsteps of a phantom killer, and the chilling sound of an axe being dragged slowly across the floor, announcing that the nightmare of Valeska has never truly ended. Deep in the remote mountains of the American West lies an abandoned mine, a relic of the gold rush era, when men risked everything in search of fortune. For decades, the mine stood silent, its tunnels stretching like veins through the earth, dark and claustrophobic. Nature reclaimed much of its timbers rotted, shafts collapsed, but some areas remained eerily intact, as if waiting. Among locals, the mine carries a reputation, whispered around campfires and in hushed tones at the town's only bar. They say something moves down there, something that isn't human. The story begins with two friends, Alex and Mason, amateur urban explorers who ran a small YouTube channel documenting abandoned places. When they heard about the old mine, they knew it would make the perfect video. The locals warned them to stay away, speaking of accidents, missing hikers, and strange noises echoing from the depths. But the warnings only made them more curious. One crisp autumn morning, they packed their gear, flashlights, ropes, a GoPro, and set out for the mountains. After a long hike, they found the entrance, a gaping black mouth carved into the rock, framed by splintered timbers and rusting rails that once guided ore carts. The air that drifted out was cold and damp, carrying the metallic temps of iron and something else, a sour smell that clung to the back of their throats. Mason laughed nervously. "Smells like death," he joked, though his voice trembled. Alex grinned for the camera, trying to mask his unease, and they stepped inside. The darkness swallowed them almost immediately. Their flashlights carved thin tunnels of light through the black, revealing walls slick with moisture and jagged with quartz veins. The silence was oppressive. Every sound they made the crunch of gravel underfoot. The drip of water from the ceiling echoed down the shaft, amplified until it felt like the mine itself was breathing. They ventured deeper, filming as they went. The air grew colder, the smell stronger. At one point, Alex stopped to catch his breath and realized something strange. He couldn't hear Mason anymore. No footsteps, no shuffling, just silence. "Mason," he called, his voice cracking. A few seconds later, Mason's flashlight beam appeared from around the bend. "Don't do that," Alex muttered, laughing nervously. Mason frowned. "I didn't stop. I thought you were behind me." Uneasy, they pressed on. Eventually, they reached a large chamber, a junction where several tunnels branched off in different directions. Old equipment littered the floor, rusted picks, a broken helmet, the skeletal remains of an ore cart. They set the GoPro on a rock to film a wide shot. As they checked their gear, a sound echoed from one of the tunnels. A soft scrape, like stone against stone. Both men froze. "Probably a rock falling," Mason whispered, but then it came again, closer this time. A dragging sound, deliberate and slow, as if something heavy was being pulled along the floor. Alex swung his flashlight toward the tunnel. Nothing but darkness. "Hello," he called. His voice seemed to vanish into the black, absorbed by the earth. The dragging stopped. Then, from deep within the tunnel, came a whisper, faint, almost like breath brushing against the ear. "Leave." Alex stumbled backward, his flashlight shaking. Mason cursed under his breath, grabbing the camera. "We're getting out of here," he said. But as they turned to leave, something moved. It began as a shadow at the edge of the light, a smudge of darkness that didn't belong. Slowly, it grew, stretching along the wall, impossibly tall and thin, its limbs elongated like twisted branches. The shadow detached itself from the wall and stepped forward. There was no face, no eyes, just an absence of light, a void that seemed to drink in their flashlight beams. The temperature plunged, their breaths fogged in the beam of the GoPro, which continued to record as the figure advanced silently across the chamber. Mason screamed, bolting for the nearest tunnel. Alex hesitated, frozen in terror, his flashlight locked on the thing as it glided closer, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a film played at the wrong speed. Then it stopped. For a heartbeat, the mine was deathly silent. Alex could hear his own heart pounding in his ears. Then the whisper returned, louder now, layered with other voices, men, women, children, all speaking at once, all saying the same word, "Stay." That broke him. Alex turned and ran, chasing Mason's fading light through the tunnels. Behind them, the whispers rose to a deafening chorus, echoing from every direction. The beams of their flashlights jerked wildly over walls and timbers as they sprinted. The sound of their boots pounding against the rock, mixing with the frantic drag of something chasing them. At one point, Alex glanced back and wished he hadn't. The shadow was following, flowing along the floor like liquid darkness, its limbs stretching to impossible lengths, clawing at the walls as it came. They burst out of the mine into the gray daylight, gasping for air. The forest was silent, the entrance yawning behind them like a wound in the earth. They didn't stop running until they reached their truck. Only then did they realize the GoPro was still in Alex's hand, the red light blinking. Later, when they watched the footage, their stomachs turned cold. In the final frames, just before they fled, the camera caught the shadow clearly towering in the center of the chamber, arms outstretched, its head cocked at an unnatural angle, as if smiling. Alex and Mason never posted the video. They deleted it, or at least tried to. But every time they checked their hard drive, the file was there, the thumbnail frozen on that image of the thing in the dark. Alex swears he hears whispers at night now, faint at first, but growing louder, telling him to come back. Mason moved away, but he hasn't escaped either, he says sometimes. When he's alone, he sees something move in the corners of his vision, something tall, something waiting. The old mine still sits in the mountains, its tunnels stretching deep into the earth. Most people avoid it, but some say if you stand at the entrance after sundown, you can hear whispers drifting from the darkness, whispers that promise gold, glory, or maybe just an end to the silence. But if you go inside, be careful. The shadow is still there, waiting for the next soul to wander too far into its black, endless home. It started as a curiosity, something picked up at a flea market on a sunny Saturday afternoon. Emma, an avid collector of vintage items, had spotted the doll sitting among a pile of old trinkets and faded toys. Its porcelain face was cracked in places, the paint on its lips chipped, and one of its glass eyes was slightly misaligned, giving it a strangely lifelike expression. It wore a frayed lace dress, yellowed with age, and tiny black shoes with scuffed soles. There was nothing particularly special about it, yet Emma felt an odd pull, an inexplicable urge to take it home. The vendor, an elderly woman with watery eyes, smiled when Emma picked up the doll. "That one's been around a long time," she said softly. "Brings company." Emma laughed it off, assuming it was just a sales pitch to make the worn-out toys seem more interesting. She paid a few dollars, tucked the doll into her bag, and went on her way, unaware of what she had just invited into her life. When she got home, Emma placed the doll on a small shelf in her living room, among her other collectibles. At first, everything seemed normal, but over the next few days, little things began to happen. She'd come home from work and find the doll in a slightly different position, its head tilted at a different angle, or its hands resting differently in its lap. Emma assumed she must have bumped the shelf without noticing. But then came the noises, soft tapping sounds in the middle of the night, faint but persistent, as if tiny porcelain fingers were drumming against wood. One evening, Emma decided to record overnight footage to put her mind at ease. She set up her phone on a tripod, pointing it at the shelf where the doll sat. "This will prove it's just my imagination," she muttered, trying to shake off the unease crawling up her spine. Before going to bed, she glanced at the doll one last time. Its cracked smile seemed wider than before, though she told herself that was ridiculous. The next morning, Emma eagerly checked the recording. At first, everything was still. Hours passed in silence as the camera rolled, the doll sitting motionless. But then, at 3:13 a.m., something changed. The doll's head moved. Emma froze, her breath caught in her throat as she watched the tiny motion unfold. It wasn't a trick of light or shadow. The head rotated with deliberate intent, the glass eyes shifting to face the camera directly. Emma's heart pounded as she continued watching. Then, in one sudden, fluid motion, it raised its tiny hand and pressed it against its chest, clutching the fabric of its lace dress. Emma felt a cold sweat break out across her skin. She rewound the footage again and again, hoping to find some logical explanation. But there was none. The doll had moved on its own. Shaken, Emma decided to share the video online. Within hours, it went viral. Thousands of viewers commented, some accusing her of faking it, others insisting it was real. Paranormal enthusiasts claimed the doll was possessed by a spirit, perhaps that of a child, or something far more sinister. Emma tried to laugh it off, but deep down, fear had rooted itself in her bones. That night, she considered putting the doll in the attic, but something stopped her, a strange sense of dread, as if moving it would make things worse. Instead, she left it on the shelf and tried to sleep. Around midnight, she woke to a sound that turned her blood cold. A faint creak, followed by a soft thud, like tiny footsteps on the hardwood floor. Emma sat up in bed, straining to hear. The sound came again, closer this time. Her phone lay on the nightstand. With trembling hands, she opened the camera app and switched on the flashlight. The beam of light swept across the room, revealing nothing out of place till she reached the doorway. The doll was there, standing upright on the floor, its cracked face tilted slightly, its glass eyes glinting in the light. Emma couldn't move. The doll had been on the shelf when she went to bed. Now it stood less than 6 feet away. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she whispered, "This isn't real. This isn't real." Summoning every ounce of courage, she lunged forward, grabbed the doll. She taped the box shut, her hand shaking so violently the tape tore unevenly. Then she carried it to the garage and left it there, determined to get rid of it the next day. But Emma didn't sleep. Every sound in the house made her flinch. At 3:13 a.m., her phone buzzed with the notification emotion alert from the camera in the living room. Heart racing, she opened the feed. The shelf was empty, as expected, but the camera caught something else. The box in the garage, shifting slightly, rocking back and forth on its own. By morning, Emma had made up her mind. She drove to a remote area outside town and left the box in a dumpster, making sure it was buried beneath bags of trash. She drove away without looking back, relief washing over her in waves. But that night, when she returned home, her stomach dropped. The doll was sitting on the shelf again, its head tilted, its cracked smile wider than ever. Emma stopped filming after that. She stopped sleeping, too. Friends say she's changed, jumpy, hollow-eyed, always glancing over her shoulder. No one knows what happened after she deleted her social media and vanished from town. Some believe she left to escape the doll, while others think she never left at all. What remains is the video, still circulating online, showing the doll turning its head to face the camera at exactly 3:13 a.m. And if you watch closely, in the final seconds, you'll see its lips move, not enough to hear, but enough to know it's whispering something meant for you. Something that sounds an awful lot like your name. In the heart of an old English village, nestled among cobblestone streets and weathered stone cottages, stands the Red Lion, a centuries-old pub known for its hearty ales, roaring fireplaces, and a history as rich and dark as the stout it serves. For generations, locals and travelers alike have gathered beneath its low timber beams, sharing stories and laughter late into the night. But the Red Lion is famous not just for its drinks, but for something far less convivial, a long history of poltergeist activity that has left even the bravest souls uneasy. The pub dates back to the 1600s, originally built as a coaching inn for weary travelers. Over the centuries, it changed hands many times, surviving fires, renovations, and even a brief stint as a private residence. Throughout its history, tales of strange happenings have circulated among patrons and staff. Glasses shatter without cause, doors slam open and shut, and mysterious footsteps echo down empty hallways. But it wasn't until the arrival of Sarah, a young bartender with a keen interest in the paranormal, that the activity seemed to intensify. Sarah began working at the Red Lion on a chilly autumn evening. From the moment she stepped inside, she felt the pub was different from any place she had worked before. The air was thick with history, but also something else, an unseen presence that prickled her skin and tugged at her senses. At first, she chalked it up to old buildings and her own imagination. But soon, the signs became impossible to ignore. One night, as Sarah was closing up, she heard the unmistakable crash of breaking glass from the main bar. Rushing inside, she found a row of pint glasses shattered on the floor. Though no one else was in sight, there was no draft, no reason for the glasses to fall, and the security cameras showed no intruders. It was the first clear sign that the Red Lion was alive with something more than just the laughter of its patrons. Over the following weeks, Sarah experienced a series of increasingly unsettling events. She would find chairs overturned in the morning, despite locking the pub tightly the night before. Bottles would inexplicably topple from shelves, rolling across the wooden floor as if pushed by invisible hands. The lights flickered erratically, sometimes plunging the entire pub into darkness for several seconds before returning with a soft hum. Most disturbing were the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and echoing through empty rooms late at night. Determined to understand what she was dealing with, Sarah began keeping a journal and setting up her own makeshift surveillance system, positioning cameras in key areas to capture any unexplained activity. She also spoke with older villagers, hoping to learn more about the pub's haunted reputation. Many recalled stories from their grandparents about a violent incident that had taken place in the 1800s, an argument between the innkeeper and a local man that ended in tragedy and death, right on the very spot where the bar now stands. One evening, while reviewing footage from the previous night, Sarah caught something that sent a chill down her spine. At around 2:00 a.m., the video showed a chair slowly rocking back and forth by itself, though no one was in the frame. Then, a bottle of whiskey on the top shelf began to vibrate and slide forward before tipping over and shattering on the floor. The microphone picked up faint whispers, unintelligible but urgent, rising in a crescendo before abruptly cutting off. The next night, Sarah decided to confront whatever was haunting the Red Lion. She stayed late after closing, sitting quietly at the bar with only a dim candle for light. The pub was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood. Hours passed without incident, and she began to think she had imagined everything. Then, just as the clock struck midnight, the temperature dropped suddenly. Her breath formed clouds in the air, and the candle flickered wildly before going out. In the darkness, the whispers returned, this time clearer. "Leave, leave," they repeated, the voice low and guttural. Sarah's heart pounded as she strained to locate the source. Suddenly, a chair slammed against the wall behind her, and the heavy wooden door slammed shut with a thunderous bang. She stood, her hands shaking, and called out, "Who's there? What do you want?" For a moment, nothing answered. Then, from the corner of the room, a shadowy figure seemed to emerge, a dark silhouette with indistinct features. Moving with jerky, unnatural motions, it drifted closer, passing through tables and chairs, its presence filling the room with an overwhelming sense of anger and sorrow. Sarah felt as if unseen fingers were brushing against her skin, cold and clammy, and the floor beneath her seemed to vibrate. The apparition stopped just inches from her, and in a voice like grinding stone, it said, "Justice. Not done." Before she could respond, it vanished, leaving behind a heavy silence and a faint smell of smoke. Terrified but resolute, Sarah spent the following days researching the tragic event that had cursed the Red Lion. She learned that the innkeeper's killer was never caught, his spirit restless and seeking closure. The poltergeist activity, she believed, was the manifestation of unresolved anger and injustice, a spirit trapped between worlds, unable to move on. With this knowledge, Sarah sought the help of a local medium. Together, they conducted a cleansing ritual in the pub, lighting sage and calling on the spirit to find peace. As the ritual progressed, the temperature in the room shifted again, but this time, the energy felt lighter, less hostile. The heavy presence that had weighed down the pub seemed to lift, and for the first time in months, Sarah felt calm. Though some activity has continued, occasional knocks, whispers, or flickering lights, it has diminished significantly. The Red Lion remains a gathering place, its history preserved in the aged oak beams and stone walls. Visitors now come, not just for the ale, but for a chance to glimpse the pub's haunted past and to feel the lingering presence of a story that refuses to be forgotten. For those who know the Red Lion, the Poltergeist is a reminder of lives once lived, of unresolved stories etched into the very fabric of the building. And while the spirit may no longer rage as fiercely, it serves as a warning some debts are never paid, and some voices will never be silenced. Along the narrow, winding country roads of rural England, where ancient trees arch overhead and fog often blankets the landscape in the early morning, there exists a chilling legend that has whispered through generations. The tale of the White Lady, known to appear suddenly in the dead of night or the dim light of dawn. She is a spectral figure, clad entirely in white, her flowing dress trailing behind her like mist, her pale face expressionless yet hauntingly sorrowful. For decades, travelers and locals alike have reported encounters with this mysterious apparitions, some fleeting glimpses, others terrifying confrontations that have kept the legend alive and fueled the deep unease about driving alone on these quiet roads after dark. The story of the White Lady dates back over a century, rooted in a tragic event that remains shrouded in mystery. According to local lore, she was once a young woman named Eleanor, engaged to a man she loved dearly. On the night before their wedding, Eleanor set out along the country lane to meet her, who had promised to pick her up, but she never arrived. Some say she was struck by a carriage in the darkness, the driver fleeing the scene and leaving her to die alone on the cold road. Others whisper that she was betrayed, lured away, and murdered by someone jealous of their happiness. Regardless of the truth, Eleanor's spirit, dressed in her wedding gown, is said to still wander the roads, searching for her lost love or, perhaps, seeking justice. One of the earliest recorded encounters with a White Lady comes from a farmer named George, who lived just outside the village. One foggy October evening, George was returning home late after tending to his fields. As his car crept along the narrow lane, headlights piercing the mist, he suddenly saw her standing at the edge of the road, a woman in white, her face pale and eyes wide, with a sorrow that seemed to stretch through time. Startled, George slammed on the brakes, but when he looked again, she had vanished without a trace. His heart pounded, and the chill that ran down his spine told him he had witnessed something beyond explanation. Over the years, many have shared similar stories. A couple driving home from a late pub visit saw the White Lady step into the road. When they stopped to look, she was nowhere to be found. Another witness, a young woman named Claire, described a terrifying encounter while walking home from a bus stop. The figure appeared suddenly in the mist, silently following her for several minutes, vanishing only when Claire quickened her pace. Each account paints a picture of a restless, mournful spirit tied forever to the lonely stretches of country road. Photographs and videos purporting to capture the White Lady are rare and often dismissed as hoaxes or tricks of the light. But one particularly compelling piece of evidence emerged just a few years ago, when a local resident, Mark, installed a motion-activated camera along the lane to monitor wildlife. Reviewing the footage one morning, he was stunned to find a ghostly figure gliding across the frame, a woman in white, her dress billowing, face indistinct but unmistakably human in shape. The clip went viral in local news, reigniting interest and fear surrounding the legend. Skeptics argue that the sightings can be explained by natural causes: fog playing tricks on the eyes, white clothing seen at a distance, or even animals mistaken for humans. But for those who have experienced the encounter firsthand, the feeling of being in the presence of the White Lady is profound and chilling. Many report a sudden drop in temperature, an overwhelming sadness that fills the air, and a sensation of being watched long after the figure has disappeared. Local folklore has evolved around the White Lady, with some suggesting she is a guardian of the land, warning travelers to be cautious on the dangerous roads. Others believe she is trapped between worlds, unable to rest until her story is told and her tragedy avenged. Every year, some villagers leave flowers at the roadside where she is most often seen, hoping to ease her restless spirit. One chilling encounter was shared by Tom, a taxi driver who worked a night shift. One fog-laden evening, he picked up a passenger near the village edge, only to find that the woman in white appeared in his rearview mirror shortly after. She remained seated silently in the back seat, her eyes vacant, until Tom finally stopped the car near the spot where the accident was said to have occurred. When he turned to speak to her, the seat was empty, the door hadn't opened, and the passenger was gone without a trace. Shaken, Tom never returned to that road after midnight. The legend of the White Lady has inspired countless local tales, songs, and even artwork. She has become a symbol of love lost, betrayal, and the thin veil between life and death that rural England's landscapes seem to blur. Tourists sometimes come hoping to catch a glimpse or photograph, but most leave unsettled, feeling the weight of a presence they cannot see but deeply sense. Despite the fear she inspires, some say the White Lady's appearances are not malevolent. Rather, she is a tragic reminder of past lives and the stories forgotten by time. In this way, the quiet country road she haunts becomes a place where history and the supernatural entwine, a place where travelers are invited to pause, remember, and respect the shadows that linger just beyond the headlights. To this day, those driving alone down the winding country lanes after dusk remain cautious. They watch for a flash of white in the corner of their eyes, a fleeting figure stepping lightly on the foggy pavement. And when they see her, the White Lady, their hearts beat a little faster, both in fear and in awe of the mysterious presence that has become a timeless part of the countryside's whispered legends. Fort Pulaski, standing sentinel over the Savannah River in Georgia, is a silent monument to the turbulent history of the American South. Constructed in the early 19th century to protect the port of Savannah, the fort played a significant role during the Civil War, enduring bombardments and sieges that forever scarred its walls. But beyond its historical importance, Fort Pulaski is also renowned for tales of a ghost soldier apparition that has haunted the fort for over a century, capturing the imagination of visitors and historians alike. The ghost soldier is said to be the restless spirit of a young Confederate infantryman who met a tragic fate within the fort's imposing brick walls. Though his identity remains unknown, eyewitnesses describe him as wearing a faded gray uniform, complete with a worn kepi hat and a rifle slung over his shoulder. His expression is solemn, haunted by the memories of battle and loss. Numerous visitors and park rangers have reported seeing this figure walking the ramparts or standing guard near the old cannon emplacements, as if forever bound to his post. One of the earliest recorded sightings comes from the late 1800s. Shortly after the fort was decommissioned, local fishermen claimed to have seen a lone soldier pacing along the fortress's upper walls at dusk. They described the soldier as moving with purpose, sometimes pausing to peer into the distance as if watching for approaching enemies. When approached, the figure would vanish into thin air, leaving only the faint echo of marching footsteps. In more recent decades, the ghost soldier's presence has been captured by numerous visitors, many of whom come specifically hoping to glimpse the apparition. A park ranger named John recounted his experience during a late-night security patrol. As he made his rounds along the fort's parapet, he noticed a figure emerging from the shadows. At first, John thought it was a fellow ranger or visitor, but as the figure drew closer, he realized it was a solitary soldier in full Civil War uniform, his face pale and distant. The soldier nodded solemnly before disappearing through the brick wall. John's heart raced as he realized he had encountered something supernatural. Photographs taken at the fort have sometimes captured unexplained anomalous shadowy shapes in doorways, faint outlines of figures in old uniform, and inexplicable mists hovering near the ramparts. One famous photo, taken in the 1980s, shows a transparent soldier standing beside a cannon, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Though skeptics argue these images are tricks of light or long exposure, many visitors swear by their authenticity. The ghost soldier's story is deeply intertwined with the fort's history. During the Civil War, Fort Pulaski was a strategic Confederate stronghold until April 1862, when Union forces laid siege and bombarded it with rifled cannons, one of the first uses of this new technology in warfare. The relentless artillery fire reached the fort's walls in just 30 hours, forcing the Confederate garrison to surrender. Many soldiers lost their lives during the siege or in the months that followed. their spirits believed to linger in the places they fought and died. Some accounts suggest that the ghost soldier is not just a wandering spirit, but a guardian, protecting the fort and honoring his fallen comrades. Visitors often report feeling a sudden chill or a presence watching them as they explore the grounds, particularly near the old barracks and the powder magazine. At times, distant sounds of drums and bugle calls have been heard, even though no ceremonies are taking place. One chilling encounter was shared by a group of history students visiting the fort. While exploring the underground tunnels, they heard footsteps echoing behind them. Though they were alone, turning around, they glimpsed a shadowy figure in Confederate uniform moving silently through the corridor. Suddenly, the lights flickered and the temperature dropped sharply. The group hurried out of the tunnels, shaken but unable to explain what they had seen. Over the years, Fort Pulaski has embraced its haunted reputation, offering ghost tours and nighttime investigations. Visitors recount experiences of unexplained noises, sudden gusts of cold air, and fleeting glimpses of the ghost soldier watching silently from the battlements. Some even claim that the soldier's ghost sometimes appears to reenactors during Civil War events, standing motionless among them, a spectral observer of history unfolding. The legend of the ghost soldier has become more than just a spooky story. It serves as a reminder of the sacrifices made and the lingering impact of war. The fort's enduring presence and its spectral sentinel evoke the weight of history, the echoes of conflict, and the human stories behind the bricks and mortar. To this day, those who visit Fort Pulaski are drawn not only by its architectural grandeur and historical significance, but also by the chance to encounter the ghost soldier, a silent guardian from the past who watches over the fort, forever bound by duty and memory. Whether skeptic or believer, the legend leaves an indelible impression, a haunting reminder that some spirits never truly leave the battlefield. If you've made it this far, you're braver than most. 20 real paranormal encounters, each more terrifying than the last. Which one chilled you to the bone? Was it the shadow figure moving in an empty hallway? The ghost child caught on a baby monitor? Or maybe it was something else you saw in these clips, something I didn't mention, something only you noticed. The truth is, the camera never lies, and these recordings prove that sometimes the dead refuse to stay silent. The world is full of mysteries we can't explain, and every day, new footage emerges, hauntings, possessions, unexplained movements, caught in the moment by ordinary people, just like you. If you've ever experienced something like this, share your story in the comments. I read every single one, and who knows, your experience might end up in the next video. Before you go, remember this. When you turn off the lights tonight, listen closely. If you hear footsteps in an empty hallway, whispers in the dark, or see a shadow move where no one should be, don't panic. Just remember, you were warned. Thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay brave, and above all, stay in the light, because in the darkness, they're waiting.